The first time I realized something was wrong, my husband asked me to loan him $80,000 for a project he refused to explain properly. Not 20. Not 5. $80,000. He asked for it casually too. Standing in our kitchen at midnight in gray sweatpants and socks, eating leftover rosemary potatoes directly from the refrigerator container while I sat at the island balancing invoices for an event that would pay my staff for the next 3 months. Temporary cash flow issue, he said. Temporary. That word. People destroy entire lives with words like temporary. I looked up from my laptop slowly. $80,000 is not temporary money, I said. He smiled tiredly like I was being dramatic. It's an investment opportunity. What kind? A hospitality project. What kind of hospitality project? A resort partnership. Where? Jeju. What resort? He paused half a second too long. That was the first moment. Not the affair. Not the wedding. Not the ballroom. That pause. Because I knew my husband. Or at least I thought I did. And Min-jae had always been a man who answered quickly when he was telling the truth. Calmly. Specifically. The hesitation only came when he was arranging information in real time. I watched him close the refrigerator. Who are you partnering with? I asked. A developer. Name. It's still early. I leaned back in my chair. SEO Min-jae. That tone made him look at me properly. What? If you want $80,000 from me, you need to speak to me like I'm your wife and not a banker you're trying to impress. A silence. Then he sighed softly and walked around the island toward me. You know I wouldn't ask unless it mattered. That line should have irritated me more than it did. But love has a way of softening your instincts until your intuition sounds cruel inside your own head. He kissed my forehead. I just need help bridging the gap before investor money clears. How long? 2 months. Maximum. And you're certain? Yes. Another lie. I didn't know it yet. But it was a lie. My name is Rebecca Robinson. 34 years old. Black American. Founder and executive chef of Robinson Table, a luxury catering and private dining company in Seoul that I built from a borrowed commercial kitchen and 3 folding tables into one of the most sought-after event brands in the city. Corporate galas, embassy events, luxury weddings, private dinners for chaebol families pretending they cooked the food themselves. I built Robinson Table over 5 years of 14-hour days, burned fingertips, impossible clients, missed holidays, supplier disasters, and the specific exhaustion that comes from being the only Black woman in rooms full of people waiting quietly to see whether you fail. I didn't fail. I became expensive instead. That's what success looks like sometimes. Not applause. Invoices. I met SEO Min-jae 4 years earlier at a hotel fundraiser in Itaewon, where my company was catering an event for an architecture foundation. He wasn't rich. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't the loudest man in the room. That was part of why I noticed him. Min-jae observed instead of performed. While everyone else networked aggressively, he listened. While men interrupted each other to sound important, he asked questions and remembered answers. He worked in commercial development consulting, the kind of work that involved hotel partnerships, urban redevelopment proposals, and investment coordination between Korean firms and foreign buyers. Not glamorous, but adjacent to glamorous. He understood wealthy people without needing to become one of them. That was attractive. At least then. We dated for almost 2 years before marrying. And for most of that time, I believed I had found one of the rare men capable of loving an ambitious woman without secretly resenting her for succeeding. He supported Robinson Table publicly, bragged about me constantly, introduced me as my wife, the genius, held my purse during site inspections, rubbed my shoulders after 16-hour wedding events, told people I was the hardest working person he knew, and maybe part of him meant it. That's the dangerous thing about men like Min-jae. They are not evil every second. If they were, women would leave sooner. No, men like Min-jae love you just enough to confuse the betrayal later. That night in the kitchen, after he asked for the money, I stared at my budgeting spreadsheet while he stood beside me waiting. I could afford it. That was the truth. Robinson Table had just closed a profitable quarter. We had expanded into luxury destination events. My lead planner had finally stopped threatening to quit every Friday, and I had enough liquid reserves to help him without jeopardizing payroll. Still, something in me hesitated. Not because of the money, because of the feeling. That quiet internal shift women learn to ignore because love teaches us that suspicion is uglier than trust. Min-jae noticed the hesitation. Rebecca, I looked up. You know I would do it for you. Another dangerous sentence. Because technically he was right. And manipulative people love using technically true things. I closed my laptop slowly. When would you need it? This week. You already committed before asking me. It moved faster than expected. Of course it did. Everything suspicious always moves faster than expected. I transferred the money 2 days later. $80,000. My money. The money I earned standing on my feet for 14 hours, smiling at wealthy strangers while making sure the champagne towers didn't collapse and the lobster arrived hot and nobody died from shellfish allergies. I sent it because he kissed me afterward and called me his partner. Partner. That word too. 3 months later, I was standing inside the Imperial Aurora Hotel ballroom adjusting white orchids on a 12-meter floral installation when my entire marriage exploded. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you're new here, this is Soul and Soul Stories. We tell the stories people survive quietly. The betrayals, the humiliations, the moments where love stops being love and becomes something else entirely. Subscribe now and drop your city in the comments. Seoul, Lagos, Atlanta, Johannesburg, Toronto, Kingston, London, everywhere. Because this story starts with flowers and catering contracts and ends with a bride discovering she was never the only woman marrying the groom. Let me tell you about the wedding. The booking came through 6 weeks before the event. Luxury client, full-service premium package, 300 guests, custom champagne station, imported floral specifications, late-night dessert service, traditional Korean ceremony integration, and enough money attached to the contract that my event manager nearly cried when she read the deposit amount. The bride's name was Han Suyeon. I remember because her inquiry email was unusually detailed. Precise, elegant, specific without being rude. Women reveal themselves in event planning emails more than they realize. You can tell who has suffered before, who needs control, who fears embarrassment, who has been taught perfection is the only acceptable form of femininity. Suyeon was meticulous, but warm. She requested a consultation meeting at a tea house in Cheongdam. I almost sent my assistant. I wish I had. Instead, I went myself because luxury brides are relationship clients. They return. Their families return. Their social circles return. One wedding becomes 10 events if handled correctly. That's the thing about wealth. It moves in clusters. So I arrived at the tea house wearing cream trousers and a black silk blouse with my portfolio binder under one arm and exhaustion hidden beneath expensive lipstick. Suyeon stood when I arrived. Beautiful woman. Early 30s. Elegant in a restrained way. Not influencer beautiful. Old money beautiful. Controlled. Her hair tied neatly at the nape of her neck. Minimal jewelry. Soft voice. The kind of woman raised to never appear desperate for attention, because attention had always arrived naturally anyway. She bowed politely. Rebecca Robinson? That's me. I'm Han Suyeon. Thank you for meeting me personally. We sat. And for the next hour she described the wedding she wanted. Not extravagant. Intentional. That word stayed with me. Intentional. She wanted warmth. Family intimacy despite the guest count. No excessive gold decorations. No trendy installations. No celebrity-style performance wedding. She wanted elegance without noise. I liked her almost immediately. That complicated things later. Because it would have been easier if she were cruel. People think betrayal stories are simpler when women hate each other. Usually they're harder because they don't. By the end of the consultation, she smiled for the first time fully. I'm glad I chose your company. Thank you. My fiancé wanted someone refined but not emotionally cold. I laughed softly. That's a very specific request. He's very particular. About food. About everything. That should have meant nothing. Instead it sits in my memory now like a warning label. She showed me reference photos. Venue concepts. Fabric palettes. Floral inspiration. And once, only once, she turned her phone accidentally while pulling up a ballroom image. Long enough for me to glimpse a man's shoulder in a photograph. Gray suit. Watch. Familiar watch. My stomach tightened briefly. Then released. Because lots of men own watches. And exhaustion makes women paranoid. I ignored it. That was mistake number 1. Over the next month, Suyeon and I spoke constantly. Guest revisions. Wine changes. Family requests. Telling me her future mother-in-law interfering with table arrangements. Normal wedding stress. Min-jae traveled frequently during this period. Busan, Singapore, Jeju. Always work. Always temporary. Always tired afterward. And somehow always emotionally unavailable exactly when I needed closeness. But marriage changes shape over time. At least that's what women tell ourselves while swallowing loneliness beside men who no longer look at us properly. Still, there were moments. Small moments. The kind your instincts notice before your logic catches up. He guarded his phone more carefully. Started showering immediately after arriving home. Smiled at messages without explaining them. Became oddly interested in my event schedule. What venue tomorrow? Which client? How late will you be? Not suspicious enough individually. That's how betrayal survives. Not through giant mistakes. Through small, reasonable things accumulating quietly. The week before the wedding, Min-jae borrowed another $15,000. This time he looked ashamed asking. That performance almost won me over completely. I hate asking again. Then stop asking, I almost said. Instead, what happened? Investor delay. Again. He rubbed his face tiredly. You know how these projects are. No, I didn't. Because there was no project. There was only a wedding. His wedding. I transferred the money anyway. $95,000 total. Nearly $100,000 of my labor financing the destruction of my own marriage. The wedding day arrived cold and bright. Late autumn. Clear skies over Seoul. The Imperial Aurora Hotel overlooked the Han River with floor-to-ceiling ballroom windows that turned sunset into architecture. We arrived at 7 a.m. My staff unloaded catering equipment, while florists screamed at delivery coordinators and planners, ran around holding clipboards like weapons. Normal luxury wedding chaos. I thrive in chaos. That's the truth. Some women fall apart under pressure. I become sharper, more precise, more alive. By noon the ballroom looked extraordinary. Cream roses, ivory orchids, floating candles, champagne towers reflecting amber light, soft string quartet rehearsing near the stage. Perfection. Suyin arrived at 1:30 for bridal preparation. She looked nervous. Not unhappy. Nervous in the way women become before permanently attaching their lives to another person. I adjusted her veil personally. You okay? She smiled faintly. I think so. That's not convincing. A small laugh. Were you calm before your wedding? No. Good. Anyone calm before marriage is either lying or dangerous. That made her laugh properly. I remember that laugh now more painfully than almost anything else. Because she trusted me. Neither of us knew yet that we were standing inside the same betrayal from opposite sides. At 3:15, one of my servers approached me near the dessert station. Rebecca? Yes. The groom's side wants to confirm champagne timing. Okay. They're in the private suite upstairs. I nodded distractedly. Then paused. Did they say the groom's name? She checked her notes. Seo. My body went still. Seo. A common surname. One of the most common in Korea. My brain knew that immediately. My body reacted anyway. What's the full name? She checked again. Seo Min. Someone called her name before she finished. She hurried away. And suddenly I couldn't breathe correctly. Not panic. Instinct. That deep animal instinct women possess before disaster fully arrives. I stood very still beside the champagne wall, while guests drifted into the ballroom laughing softly beneath crystal lighting. Seo. There are millions of Seos. Millions. I knew that. Then why was my heart beating like that? I told myself to stop being ridiculous. Min-jae was in Busan. He had texted me that morning. Big presentation today. Proud of you. Good luck with event. I still had the message. I checked it again. Then another detail surfaced. The watch. The photograph during consultation. The secrecy. The money. The emotional distance. The travel. No. I started walking toward the elevators before fully deciding to. Slowly at first. Then faster. Staff moved around me carrying trays and floral boxes while my pulse hammered violently beneath my ribs. The private wedding suites occupied the upper floor. Bride on one side. Groom on the other. Separate preparation areas before ceremony. I pressed the elevator button. My reflection stared back at me from mirrored doors. Professional makeup. Black tailored uniform dress. Pearl earrings. Calm face. But my eyes already knew something my mind was still refusing. The elevator opened. I stepped inside. 30-second ride. Longest 30 seconds of my life. When the doors opened upstairs, I heard laughter from down the corridor. Male voices. Wedding party energy. And then, his voice. Seo Min-jae. My husband's voice. My entire body stopped. Not metaphorically. Actually stopped. Like my nervous system disconnected from movement. I stood there frozen in hotel silence while his laugh carried faintly through the corridor toward me. No. No, no, no. There are moments when reality arrives too large for the brain to process immediately. This was one of them. I walked forward slowly. One step. Another. The groom's suite door stood slightly open. And then I saw him. My husband. Standing in front of a mirror in a black tuxedo while another man adjusted his bow tie. Smiling. Relaxed. Happy. Not in Busan. Not at a project presentation. At his wedding. My catering tray slipped from my hand and crashed against the hallway floor. The sound exploded through the corridor. Min-jae turned instantly. And our eyes met. The color left his face so fast it looked violent. Not guilt first. Fear. Pure fear. Because in that exact second he understood two things simultaneously. I knew. And his wedding was about to begin. The tray hit the marble floor so hard that champagne glasses shattered beneath it. The sound ripped through the corridor. Conversation stopped instantly. Every head turned. And Seo Min-jae stared at me like he had just seen a ghost drag itself out of the ocean. For one suspended second nobody moved. Not his groomsmen. Not the hotel staff. Not me. Then Min-jae crossed the room toward the doorway, so quickly he nearly knocked into the makeup artist beside him. Rebecca. My body finally started working again. I stepped backward. Not dramatically. Instinctively. Like distance itself might protect me from what I was seeing. He reached the doorway. Listen to me. Listen. That word. Men always want women to listen after the lie explodes. Never before. Before, they want trust. Afterward, they want patience. I looked past him into the suite. Wedding jackets. Gift boxes. Champagne. Men adjusting cufflinks. One of them staring at me with sudden recognition. Not because he knew me personally. Because he had seen my wedding photos somewhere. My stomach twisted violently. That was the second realization. Not only had Min-jae built another life. Some people around him knew I existed. Not all. But enough. Enough for shame to enter the room immediately. Rebecca, Min-jae said again quietly. I finally found my voice. You're getting married. It came out flatter than I expected. Not screaming. Not crying. Just fact. Behind him, one of the men muttered. Hyung. Min-jae glanced backward sharply. Fear everywhere now. Good. I wanted fear. Not because it fixed anything. Because I had financed this terror with $95,000 and my entire marriage. You said you were in Busan, I said. Can we please not do this here? That sentence almost made me laugh. Not do this here. As if location was now the issue. As if geography had ruined his second wedding. You borrowed money from me 3 days ago. Rebecca, you borrowed money from your wife to marry another woman. His face tightened. And suddenly something changed in him. Not remorse. Calculation. The look of a man mentally rearranging damage control in real time. Come with me. No. Please. No. People had started staring openly now. Hotel staff frozen halfway down the corridor. A florist pretending not to watch. One groomsman quietly backing away like proximity itself could become evidence. And then another voice arrived behind me. Rebecca, Han Suyeon. Still wearing half her bridal makeup. White silk robe. Veil not yet attached. Confusion already forming across her face as she looked between us. Then at Min-jae. Then back at me. I saw the exact second her instincts noticed something wrong. Women know. Before words. Before explanations. Women know. Why is the caterer upstairs? One of her bridesmaids asked nervously. Nobody answered. Suyeon looked at me carefully. Then at Min-jae again. And suddenly she said something that changed the entire room. You know each other? Silence. Absolute silence. Min-jae stepped forward quickly. Suyeon. But she wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking at me. Women always look at each other first during betrayal. Because somewhere deep inside us lives the understanding that the truth usually sits in another woman's face before it reaches language. How do you know him? She asked me quietly. My throat tightened. And for one brief terrible second, I almost protected him. That's the sickest part of love sometimes. Even while drowning, women still reach toward the man holding their head underwater. Min-jae saw the hesitation instantly. Rebecca, he said carefully, please. Please what? Please lie for him? Please preserve the ballroom downstairs? Please protect the image of the man who had stolen nearly $100,000 from his wife to fund another marriage? No. No more. I looked directly at Han Suyin, then at the engagement ring on her hand, then back into her eyes. And I said, I'm his wife. The corridor exploded. Not physically. Emotionally. Noise everywhere at once. What? Oh my God. Min-jae. No, no, no. Suyin's face emptied completely. Not rage first. Disbelief. Pure catastrophic disbelief. Like her brain rejected the sentence before her body could process it. Min-jae moved immediately toward her. It's not what you think. Every cheating man on earth receives the same script at birth, apparently. Suyin stepped backward. What did she just say? Listen to me. Answer me. His jaw tightened. And that hesitation, that tiny hesitation, was enough. I watched her entire world crack open in real time. She looked back at me. How long have you been married? 2 years. One bridesmaid covered her mouth. Another quietly started crying. Min-jae looked like he wanted to physically stop time. Suyin shook her head slowly. No. Then to him. No. Let me explain. You said you were divorced. The corridor went still again. Divorced. Of course. Of course that was the lie. Not single. Men like Min-jae never risk fully single because single men require explanations. Separated sounds tragic. Divorced sounds clean. He had probably turned me into a difficult memory. An emotionally unstable ex-wife who couldn't let go. Meanwhile, I was upstairs balancing floral invoices at his wedding. Something ugly and hot started rising inside me. Not heartbreak anymore. Humiliation. The kind that burns. Suyin stared at him like she no longer recognized the shape of his face. You told me she left Korea. Please lower your voice. That line finally broke something in her. She laughed once. Sharp. Disbelieving. You are worried about volume right now? People are downstairs. Yes, she said. At my wedding. My wedding. God. I suddenly felt sick for her. Because this woman had spent months planning a future around a man who existed nowhere except inside his own lies. And then Min-jae did the worst thing possible. He looked at me and said, You weren't supposed to be here. Everything stopped inside me. Not because the sentence hurt. Because it revealed everything. Not guilt. Not love. Not regret. Logistics. His concern wasn't betrayal. His concern was scheduling. The room heard it too. I watched the realization move across Suyin's face like something physical. You invited your wife's company to cater our wedding? I didn't know she personally handled this client. You used her business? Please, he snapped quietly, stop making this worse. Worse. I almost smiled. Worse than marrying another woman while still legally married? Interesting threshold. One of the older groomsmen finally spoke. Min-jae, maybe the ceremony should pause. Min-jae turned on him instantly. No. That told me everything too. Not ashamed. Cornered. There's a difference. Suyin looked at him slowly. You still plan to go through with this? He didn't answer immediately. That silence became the answer. Then downstairs. Music began. The string quartet. Ceremony cue. Guests taking seats. 300 people arriving for a marriage already dead before it began. And suddenly the entire situation became horrifyingly public. Suyin looked like she might faint. I moved automatically toward her before thinking. She stared at me in disbelief. Not because I moved. Because I moved kindly. That's another thing women don't talk about enough. Sometimes the person who understands your humiliation best is the other woman standing inside it with you. Min-jae noticed too. Rebecca. No. My voice finally sharpened fully. No, you don't get to say my name like we're discussing schedules. He rubbed both hands across his face. We can fix this privately. Privately. There it was again. The obsession with containment. Men like Min-jae don't fear hurting women. They fear audiences. Suyin suddenly took off her engagement ring. Not dramatically. Almost calmly. That terrified him more than screaming would have. Don't do this. Do what? Please. You lied to me for over a year. It became complicated. No, she said quietly. It became real. That line hit everyone. Even me. Because she was right. Affairs feel temporary until invitations get printed. Then fantasy becomes architecture. I finally looked directly at Min-jae again. How many people know? What? How many people downstairs know you're married? Silence. That silence answered too. Not everyone. But someone. Enough people. Enough to let this continue. Disgust rolled through me. Not just toward him. Toward everyone who quietly watched a woman build her wedding around another woman's husband. One bridesmaid whispered, "This is insane." No. Insane would have been simpler. This was calculated. Min-jae stepped toward me carefully. "We should talk alone." I laughed then. Actually laughed. "You borrowed money from me last week. Rebecca, you kissed me goodbye this morning. Please. You let me cater your wedding." His face cracked finally. Not emotionally. Socially. Because now everyone in the corridor was seeing him clearly. And manipulative men survive through image management. Not truth. Image. Suyin suddenly asked, "How much money?" Min-jae froze. I answered before he could. $95,000. Her face went white. What? He told me he needed investment money for a hospitality project. That landed like a bomb. Because now even the groomsmen looked disgusted. One muttered, "Jesus Christ." Min-jae turned sharply toward me. "You don't understand." "No," I said quietly. "You don't." Then I finally asked the question sitting inside me like glass. "When were you going to divorce me?" Silence. Again. Always silence when truth arrives. Suyin whispered. "There was going to be a honeymoon." I looked at her. She looked at me. And suddenly we both understood the same thing simultaneously. He planned to keep lying as long as possible. That realization united us instantly. Not friendship. Not solidarity. Recognition. The recognition of two women discovering they had both loved a fictional man. The wedding coordinator appeared nervously from the elevator. "Mr. CEO?" Nobody answered. She looked around the corridor and immediately regretted existing. "Guests are seated." Min-jae closed his eyes briefly, then said something unbelievable. "Give us 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Like this was a delayed presentation. Suyin stared at him in horror. "You still think there's a wedding happening? We need to think carefully." "No," she said softly. "You need to suffer carefully." God. That line. I saw why he chose her. Strong women always attract weak liars. They want the light without deserving it. Suyin turned toward her bridesmaids. "Tell my parents the ceremony is cancelled." Min-jae stepped forward immediately. "No." And there it was. The real fear. Not losing her. Public humiliation. Business fallout. Family shame. Status collapse. She looked at him with open disgust now. "You are still worried about appearances. My investors are downstairs." Ah, there it was. Always follow the money. Always. This wedding wasn't just romance. It was networking. Positioning. Status architecture. And suddenly I understood everything about the hospitality project. He hadn't borrowed money because he lacked survival money. He borrowed money because luxury weddings are expensive, and he wanted to impress wealthy people while pretending to belong among them. Using my money, my labor, my marriage, my company. I suddenly felt exhausted. Not dramatic exhaustion. Bone-deep emotional exhaustion. Like loving him had become physically heavy. Suyin looked at me carefully. Then asked, "Did you know about me?" "No. I didn't know about you either." "I know." Something softened briefly between us then. Not warmth. Grief. Shared grief. Min-jae saw it happening and panicked. "Rebecca, please tell her our marriage has been struggling." I stared at him slowly. That was his strategy? Minimization? She deserves context. "No," I said quietly. "You deserve consequences." The elevator doors opened again. Older family members this time. An aunt maybe. Someone from Suyin's side. And immediately the whispering started. Because scandals move faster than elevators in Korean luxury hotels. Minji's entire posture changed again. Image mode. Damage control mode. He lowered his voice sharply. "We are not doing this publicly." Suyin laughed again. "Cold this time. You should have thought about public consequences before scheduling 2 wives." One bridesmaid choked laughing through tears. Honestly? Deserved. I suddenly realized my staff downstairs still thought I was coordinating service. My company. My employees. My reputation. I inhaled slowly, then straightened my shoulders. And that movement changed everything. Because until then I had been reacting. Now I started deciding. I looked at Min-jae calmly. Robinson Table will not continue catering this wedding. Panic crossed his face instantly. "Rebecca, you can explain to 300 guests why there's no dinner. You can't do that. Watch me. This has nothing to do with your staff. No, I said quietly. It has everything to do with my staff. My employees are not serving champagne at my husband's illegal wedding. That landed brutally. One of the hotel coordinators quietly looked away to hide a smile. Min-jae stepped closer, lowering his voice. You are being emotional. Every woman reading this knows the exact rage that sentence creates. Emotional. As though finding your husband marrying another woman should inspire spreadsheets and meditation. I moved closer too. Very calm now. Dangerously calm. No, I said softly. I'm being expensive. Then I took off my wedding ring and placed it in his hand. The entire corridor watched. You can use that for the honeymoon deposit too. His face finally broke completely. Not because he lost me, because he lost control. And honestly, that was enough for me. I turned towards Suyin. I'm sorry. She nodded once. Eyes glassy now. Me too. Then I walked away. Not running. Not collapsing. Walking. Because sometimes dignity is the only thing left to carry. Behind me I heard shouting begin. Family voices. Questions. Chaos. The wedding collapsing in real time. But I didn't turn around. Not once. The elevator doors closed between me and the sound of my marriage dying upstairs. And when I reached the ballroom level, my staff looked at me in confusion. Rebecca. I looked around at the flowers. The candles. The tables. The wedding I unknowingly built for another woman. Then I inhaled slowly and said, pack everything up. And for the first time all day, I felt free. The elevator doors opened into absolute silence. Not normal silence. The unnatural silence of 300 wealthy people realizing something catastrophic is happening nearby. My staff had already stopped moving. The string quartet had stopped playing halfway through a song. And near the ballroom entrance, guests were beginning to whisper in clusters while hotel coordinators moved with the panicked speed of people trying to contain disaster before rich people became publicly uncomfortable. I stepped out of the elevator slowly, still holding my composure together with pure force. My event manager, Lucia Moreno, spotted me immediately and hurried over in heels that sounded like gunshots against marble flooring. Rebecca. One look at my face and she stopped. Lucia had worked with me for 3 years. Mexican-Korean. Former luxury hotel planner. The most emotionally perceptive person on my staff besides me. She looked at the empty space on my left hand. Then toward the upstairs elevators. Then back at me. What happened? I answered calmly. The groom is my husband. Lucia went completely still. Not shocked immediately. Processing first. Then. What? He's marrying the bride upstairs. The color drained from her face so violently I thought she might actually faint. Oh my God. I inhaled slowly. We're leaving. What? Pack everything. Rebecca, the ballroom. I know exactly how much food is downstairs, I said quietly. Pack it anyway. Lucia stared at me for another long second. Then something cold entered her expression. Not pity. Loyalty. Okay, she said. That's why I loved her. No unnecessary questions. No dramatic performance. Just, okay. She turned immediately toward the kitchen staff. Stop service preparation. Nobody plates anything yet. The ballroom began shifting around us instantly. Confusion. Servers stopping mid-motion. Kitchen coordinators whispering. Guests noticing movement. And then, the first scream upstairs. A woman's scream. Sharp enough to cut through 3 floors of luxury architecture. The entire ballroom froze. Every single person looked upward instinctively. And suddenly the wedding atmosphere died completely. People knew. Maybe not details yet. But human beings recognize collapse instinctively. A middle-aged woman near table 7 whispered. Something's wrong. Yes. Something was very wrong. My husband had tried to marry another woman using my money and my catering company. I suddenly wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny. Because the scale of the disrespect had become almost artistic. Lucia came back toward me quickly. The hotel manager wants to speak to you. Of course he did. The Imperial Aurora hosted ministers, celebrities, corporate heirs, and diplomats. A scandal like this was a nightmare for them. Good. The manager arrived sweating lightly beneath his expensive suit. Ms. Robinson. Manager Choi. We understand there has been a personal issue. Interesting phrasing. As though attempted accidental bigamy was an inconvenience beside floral arrangements. I looked at him calmly. My staff is leaving. His eyes widened slightly. The guests have already been seated. The groom should have considered that before inviting his wife to cater his second wedding. That sentence hit him physically. He glanced around immediately to see who overheard. Too late. People already had. Whispers spread faster now. Wife. Second wedding. Caterer. The manager lowered his voice further. Perhaps we can discuss a partial continuation of service. No. Ms. Robinson, this could become legally difficult. I smiled then. First real smile all day. Manager Choi. Yes. My lawyer is going to adore this situation. That ended the conversation. Behind us the elevator doors opened again violently. Han Suyin emerged first. Still in her wedding robe. Mascara ruined now. Her mother behind her looking horrified and furious simultaneously. And Min Jae, behind all of them, looking like a man realizing his entire life had just detonated publicly. Guests started standing. Phones appeared immediately. Of course they did. Modern humiliation is always documented. Suyin saw me near the ballroom entrance and walked directly toward me while ignoring everyone else. The crowd parted automatically. That's the thing about rich people. They sense scandal like sharks sense blood. Her mother grabbed her arm midway. Suyin. She pulled away gently. No. Then she stopped directly in front of me. Up close she looked younger suddenly. Not physically. Emotionally. Like betrayal had stripped away the polished sophistication and revealed the woman underneath. I canceled the ceremony, she said quietly. I figured. He told my parents he was separated. Of course he did. Separated men are catnip to women raised to believe they're emotionally rescuing someone damaged. He said you stayed married because of finances. I laughed softly. Interesting. Considering I financed his wedding. That line spread through the guests instantly. You could physically feel the whispering intensify. Min Jae reached us finally. Can we stop doing this publicly? Suyin turned on him immediately. Publicly? She repeated. You invited 300 people. His face tightened. Then his eyes shifted toward the ballroom doors. Toward the guests. Toward the investors. Toward the older executives whispering near the windows. That's when I finally understood the true scale of his panic. This wedding wasn't romance. It was career architecture. Han Suyin's family was connected. Connected enough that this marriage elevated him socially and professionally. And now, everything was collapsing in front of exactly the wrong audience. Good. Good. One older man near the ballroom entrance suddenly stepped forward sharply. Min Jae. Authority instantly. Older Korean businessman. Gray suit. Controlled fury. Min Jae went pale immediately. Director Han. Ah. The father. Interesting. Director Han looked at his daughter first. Then at me. Then back at Min Jae. Is this woman telling the truth? Silence. Again. Always silence when cowards meet consequences. Finally. Yes. The ballroom erupted completely. Guests openly talking now. Someone cursed. One woman gasped. He's married. Director Han's expression changed from confusion to something much colder. Disappointment. The kind powerful men reserve for people who embarrass them publicly. How long? Min Jae swallowed. 2 years. Director Han closed his eyes briefly. Not because of morality. Because scandal is expensive. Then he asked the most devastating question possible. And you believe this marriage would survive discovery? God. Even I felt that. Min Jae said nothing. Because there was no answer. Director Han looked at me carefully then. And bowed. Actually bowed. I apologize. The entire ballroom went still. Because powerful older Korean men do not apologize publicly unless something catastrophic has occurred. I bowed automatically too. This was not your fault. No, he said quietly, staring at Min Jae now. It was his. That sentence destroyed him more than shouting would have. Because humiliation from authority hits men like Min Jae differently. The ballroom doors suddenly burst open again. And Min Jae's mother rushed inside. Crying already. Apparently someone had called her. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Min Jae. She reached him breathlessly. Then looked around at the destroyed wedding atmosphere. Then at me. Recognition hit instantly. Not shame. Blame. Of course. Women like her always look for the nearest woman to hold responsible for male failure. What did you do? She snapped at me. Interesting. Not. What did he do? What did you do? I looked at her calmly. Your son attempted to marry another woman while still married to me. He said you were separated. I laughed once. Actually laughed. And suddenly Min Jae looked terrified again. Because he realized something. I wasn't crying anymore. That's when manipulative men panic most. Not when women scream. When women stop breaking emotionally. His mother kept talking. You embarrassed him publicly. Mrs. CEO, I interrupted softly. Your son invited his legal wife to cater his second wedding. The silence afterward was brutal. Even she had no response immediately. Because honestly, what defense exists for that? None. Lucia appeared beside me quietly. The trucks are loaded. Good. My staff moved fast. Always had. I looked around the ballroom one final time. The flowers. Candles. Champagne towers. 300 untouched place settings. The luxury wedding I unknowingly built for my husband and another woman. Then I looked directly at Min Jae. You owe Robinson Table an outstanding balance. He blinked. What? The final invoice. Rebecca. $92,000 remaining. People actually turned to stare harder. Good. Let them. You're discussing invoices right now? Yes, I said calmly. Because unlike you, I take contracts seriously. Lucia almost smiled beside me. Director Han did smile. Very faintly. Min Jae looked destroyed now. Not emotionally. Structurally. Like every layer of his life had started collapsing simultaneously. Good. He deserved the full architecture of consequence. I took one final step toward him, lowered my voice, and said quietly enough that only he could hear. You didn't betray me because you loved her. His eyes lifted slowly. You betrayed me because you thought I would survive it quietly. That line hit him harder than anything else all day. I saw it happen. Because finally, he understood what kind of woman he had actually married. Not soft. Not weak. Patient. There's a difference. And patient women become terrifying once they stop loving you. I turned away from him then. For real this time. No hesitation. No looking back. Lucia followed beside me as we walked toward the ballroom exit while guests parted around us whispering. Phones everywhere. Scandal everywhere. Behind me I heard shouting start again. Suyin this time. Not crying anymore either. Interesting. Very interesting. Maybe he lost both women in the exact same hour. Deserved. Outside the hotel, cold Seoul air hit my face sharply. My catering trucks waited near the loading area. Staff pretending not to stare. Lucia opened the passenger door for me quietly. Then paused. You okay? No. Obviously not. But survival and honesty are not always the same thing. So instead I said, I think my marriage just catered its own funeral. Lucia covered her mouth laughing in complete disbelief. And suddenly, for the first time all day, I laughed too. Not because it was funny, because it was over. 6 months later, Robinson Table booked the largest corporate contract in company history. Turns out wealthy people love resilient women almost as much as they love gossip. The wedding scandal spread through Seoul's luxury circles for weeks. People talked. Of course they did. About the groom exposed publicly. About the bride who canceled the ceremony. About the caterer who turned out to be the legal wife. About the $95,000. About the ballroom collapse. About Min Jae. Especially about Min Jae. His consulting deal with Director Han disappeared quietly 2 weeks later. Then another partnership vanished. Then another. Funny how trust matters suddenly when men become publicly dishonest. The divorce finalized 8 months afterward. No dramatic courtroom. No reconciliation. No begging worth remembering. Just paperwork ending what lies had already destroyed. Han Suyin sent me flowers once. No note. Just white orchids. I understood anyway. And me? I kept building. That's the part people misunderstand about women like me. We do not collapse permanently. We rebuild professionally. Painfully. Expensively. And 1 year later, standing inside another luxury ballroom while adjusting candle placement for another wedding. A young assistant asked me softly, Do weddings still make you sad? I looked around the room for a moment, then smiled. No, I said. Just careful. And honestly, that was better.